Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to you. My name is Richard Orme, and I'm your host for today's webinar, Word Document Accessibility 101. Over the last few months, we've covered many topics on accessible publishing and reading. On many occasions, our presenters have been demonstrating describing images, exploring math, and creating EPUB whilst using the Microsoft Word application. But we've not tackled the topic of accessible Word documents themselves. Some of our audience tell us they like the practical, do-it-yourself webinars, so this week we'll focus on this important subject. Our wonderful panel includes a senior program manager from Microsoft and accessibility experts who provide advice and technical training on accessible Word documents to educators and government departments. So without further delay, I'll ask our panel to introduce themselves.
I'm Erin Williams, and I'm a program manager at Microsoft.
Hello everyone, my name is Kirsi Ylänne. I work at Celia Library for the Print Disabled in Finland. Greetings from Helsinki.
Hello everyone, my name is Prashant Verma. I am working as Accessibility Specialist for DAISY Consortium.
Thank you, panel. So looking forward to hearing your presentations. Let's just do a quick overview of what today's session will include. We'll start off with Erin giving us an overview of why accessibility and Microsoft Accessibility and Word. Then we'll see some demonstrations of accessibility barriers and indeed solutions before diving into techniques of how you can make sure that your Word documents are accessible to all. We'll cover Word document structure, graphics, tables, and considerations around content. We'll look at testing for accessibility, and we'll cover any questions we haven't already covered in your questions section at the end and some discussion. So let's move on then to why accessibility. Erin.
Thank you, Richard. You know, we live in a connected society. We are more connected than ever in our work, education, and personal lives. And technology can connect people in how they communicate, learn, transact, and experience the world. With over 1 billion people in the world who have disabilities, it's unfortunate that many of them can't fully participate in our economies and our societies. If we don't design for accessibility, we're excluding a large segment of the global population who could be customers, co-workers, or employees. When societies and organizations are inclusive in their approach to accessibility, they design products and services that can be seamlessly used by everyone. When services, tools, and products aren't designed inclusively, it's like saying to every 5th person who walks in your door, "You can't work here," or "I don't really want your business." We need to be inclusive in all areas of accessibility: visual, audio, mobility, cognitive, and maybe more. While it may seem like a daunting task, there are some fundamental things you can do to make a big bang for your buck. And once you start thinking inclusively, it becomes second nature. So specifically with Microsoft and accessibility, it was a little over 5 years ago when Satya Nadella, our CEO, approved a huge investment into accessibility. He came out with a pretty cool mission statement: to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. Satya stated in a company memo that went viral that the world is diverse. We will better serve everyone on the planet by representing everyone on the planet. We'll be open to learning our own biases and changing our behaviors so we can tap into the collective power of everyone at Microsoft. We don't just value differences, we seek them out, we invite them in. And as a result, our ideas are better, our products are better, and our customers are better served. At Microsoft, we're just beginning to fully understand the full impact that inclusion has on our productivity and innovation. We're taking an integrative approach to inclusion. The first of these pillars starts with our culture and our people. It's important to hire talent with disabilities. Having a diverse workforce enables us to create products that work for everyone, with accessibility embedded into those products and not just bolted on as an afterthought. We're also ensuring our systems across the company are accessible, and we think about inclusion from start to finish. Accessibility drives itself and drives innovation and change and what's possible for people with disabilities, ensuring that we have a continual focus on the future. So specifically with Microsoft Word and accessibility, Microsoft Word is currently the most widely used word processor on the market, and it's part of the Office desktop, both desktop and web versions of Office 365, working on Windows, Apple, and Android systems. The application is accessible and widely taught by most businesses and governments. Built-in features support and encourage accessibility, compatibility with screen readers such as JAWS, NVDA, Narrator, and more, as well as dictation abilities and multiple features with learning tools. Accessibility Checker is another Microsoft tool that we have in most Office 365 products, Word included, which helps ensure that your content is accessible for those who consume it. Techniques covered in this webinar will apply to Windows, Mac OS, and online versions of Word.
Thank you, Erin. Now we are going to have a look at 3 examples of accessibility barriers and solutions to the barriers. And first example is text content as an image. And sometimes text content is included as an image, perhaps a quotation with an image behind, a stylized heading, or a table copied from a spreadsheet as in this example. If text is included as an image, it cannot be read aloud or read on a braille display, and it is not possible to copy and paste text from an image. And in the next slide, we see another problem. If someone with low vision uses a high contrast scheme, then the table as an image will not display correctly. Here, the high contrast scheme in Windows has been used, so display becomes white text on black background. But the table in the Word document stays in the same colors because it was included as an image. And in the next slide, we can see that now the table is inserted into the Word document as a proper table. It now changes color according to the user preferences. Similarly, the fonts can be changed, the text made bigger, and it can be explored by someone using a screen reader. Text content included as images present a barrier to accessibility, as we see in this example. Following the correct approach means that the document is accessible to users with various disabilities.
Thanks, Kirsi. Now we will have a look at an example of heading structures, how lack of a heading structure actually creates barriers for many people with disabilities. When documents don't have a heading structure, it becomes difficult for everyone to navigate it. You can see an example here. This document has sections and subsections which are visually prominent, but when we open the navigation pane from the view ribbon, we find that the navigation pane is empty. There are no entries in it. Actually, there is a tip from Microsoft Word to make use of the heading styles to prepare the sections and subsections. We can see the second example. It is the same document and it's looking similar, but here the heading structure is present, and in the navigation pane, we can see a list of all the sections and subsections, and one can use it to navigate to any part of the document. So the heading structure is a very important part of making the document accessible. Later in this webinar, we will see how we can apply styles to prepare the structure.
Thank you, Prashant. And next we're going to have an example what happens when image descriptions are missing from a image. And in the first short demo video, we're going to see an image without alternative text, and pay attention what happens when the screen reader's focus is on the image.
Departure of the lifeboats, 00:4502:05. Picture 29, image, in line with text. The sad parting, unattributed illustration dated to 1912.
Okay, you could hear that it said picture 29 in line with text. And next example will show what happens when an alternative text is added to the image.
Departure of the lifeboats, 00:4502:05. Illustration of a weeping woman being comforted by a man on the sloping deck of a ship. In the background, men are loading other women into a lifeboat, image, in line with text. The sad parting, unattributed illustration dated to 1912.
And here you could see that the content of the image was explained because the image had an alternative text. Okay, one of the most important things to know about the accessible Word documents is that you need to use built-in heading styles for marking up headings. Do not rely on the visual layout and be happy with just editing heading text larger and bolder. Make sure that the structure of the document is marked up correctly. The heading styles contain information that is conveyed to the assistive technology. The screen readers look under the hood of the Word document and pass information about the structure to the users. And using heading styles also makes it possible for screen readers, users to navigate in the Word document, skipping from heading to heading. And styles are also needed if you want to convert your Word document into another format. Information of the styles is used to create necessary text in an accessible PDF file or EPUB publication. And now we're going to show how to mark up text heading with heading styles. So highlight the text of the heading, like here, the background, and then go home and where there are styles, choose the appropriate style, either heading 1 or heading 2. And when you use heading styles, use them in a logical and consistent way. Use heading 1 for main headings of the document and heading 2 for subheadings. And if you want to use more heading levels, use heading 3, heading 4, etc. You can use also headings 5 and 6, but don't use heading 7. Then you might run into problems with if you want to convert the document. And do not skip over heading levels, for example, from heading 1 to heading 3, because skipping heading levels can be very confusing for users of assistive technology. And you can check the heading structure in the navigation pane that was shown earlier. So choose View and then checkbox Navigation pane, and you will see on the left-hand side the heading structure. And the heading level 1 is leftmost, and then heading level 2 is indented, and heading level 3 is indented even more. So this is a very quick way to visually check the heading structure. Okay, other styles should also be used in the same way as headings. So if you want to have a list in your Word document, use the bulleted or numbered list for the list. This makes sure that the users of screen readers and assistive technology will also know when there is a list in the document. If you want to edit the font spacing or other features of the text, body text, modify the styles that you are using. For example, modify normal style to format the body text. However, it's important to know that some built-in features in Word do not work well with assistive technology at the moment. Do not insert text box in your Word document. Screen readers could ignore the text boxes and the text in the box, and the users wouldn't access the text at all. So instead of using text box, edit the text paragraph and add border to the paragraph. And visually the text will be in a box, and then the screen readers will be able to access the text. Okay, I think that many of you might already use the heading styles in Word documents, so you are already producing quite accessible Word documents. But if you want to further improve the accessibility of your Word documents, you should make sure that your pictures and images are accessible. So when you insert a picture, make sure that the picture is in line with text, and check out the layout options of the picture. When the picture is in line with text, screen readers can access the alternative text of the picture. If the picture is floating, then the screen readers may ignore the image and its alt text. And there may also be some problems if you want to convert the Word document into another format. The screen readers cannot magically scan images, as you could see in the first example. You need to add alternative text for images. And before you start writing the alternative text, or alt text as it's called, you should think, what is the purpose of the image in the document? What information the image contains, and what is told in the body text. Don't repeat the same things that are already told in the document text, but focus on the information that is important and only seen in the image. Remember that the alt text is meant for people who use screen readers, and only they can access the alt text. Unfortunately, we don't have now time to discuss more how to write alt text, but previous DAISY webinars have covered this theme. Go to the DAISY webinar page and look at 3 webinars titled The Art and Science of Describing Images. You will find excellent information about how to describe different kinds of images. But let's now have a look how to add alt text in Word. So when you have inserted an image into your Word document, select the image, and if you use a mouse, right-click on the image and choose Edit Alt Text. And then a sidebar titled Alt Text will appear. There will be a question: how would you describe this object and its context to someone who is blind? And there is a tip text, 1 to 2 sentences recommended. The newest versions of Word have an option to generate a description for me. You can try that and see what kind of results artificial intelligence at the moment can make. But I have to warn you that the quality is not very great at the moment. If you would add an automatic description for this image, the painting would say that a battleship in the water. But here we have written the alternative text ourselves, and the text is as follows: painting of a ship sinking by the bow, with people rowing a lifeboat in the foreground and other people in the water. Icebergs are visible in the background. So that is quite different than a battleship in the water. So please write the alt text yourselves. Human can guarantee the quality and consider the context of the image, which is not currently done by the artificial intelligence. And in the newest versions of Word, it is also possible to mark an image as decorative. You can use this with images that contain or that do not contain any information. For example, if there's an abstract form that only brings color to your document. If you have an older version of Word, you don't have this option marked as decorative. Then you can write a word decorative in the alt text field. Okay, now it's Prashant's turn to tell about tables.
Yeah, thanks, Karsi. To ensure that the tables are accessible for everyone, keep them as simple as possible. This is because screen readers and other assistive technologies do not cope well with complex tables. So you should avoid using merged cells, split cells, and nested tables. Do not use tables for layout purposes, such as placement of text and images. Use the table only when you want to present some tabular data. If the table has a header row, then you need to mark it. You need to ensure that it is selected properly in the Word document, so that screen readers are able to identify it and read it when they are navigating within the table. To mark the header row, you need to click on the row or select it, and then if you're using a mouse, right click and in context menu select table properties. Then you need to go to the row page and select the checkbox repeat as header row on the top of each page. and ensure that the other checkbox, um, which is to allow row to break across all pages, is not selected. That is not good for accessibility, and you can click OK. So that's all. This will make it a header row, and when screen reader users will be navigating the document, they will be able to have the column headers read aloud. Okay, what are the other content considerations? So you can use headers and footers, particularly when you are aware that the document will be printed, but be aware that assistive technologies may not detect the presence of headers and footers. So important information should not be put in the header and footer alone. Information such as name of the author or the title of the book should be in the document text as well as the header and footer. The header and footer information is also sometimes lost when the document is converted to some other formats. It is also important to identify the document language. This enables screen readers to use an appropriate voice to read aloud the text. To mark the document language, you have to select the text, and then in the review ribbon, review pane at the top, you need to choose language and then set language, and there from the list of languages select the correct language which the document text is, and then you can click OK. This will help the assistive technology users in having the text read aloud or converted to some other formats. Footnotes and endnotes should be created using the Microsoft Word features. People should be able to click on the note reference and then skip and read the note. This is possible only when you use the insert footnote option in the Microsoft Word reference ribbon. Sometimes people manually just write down the footnote reference numbers. In that case, it is not accessible. I can also demonstrate what to do with the hyperlinks. The hyperlinks should have a label which is easy to read and understand. For example, on the slide that you see on the screen, the first hyperlink has the label Wikipedia article on sinking of the Titanic. This is easy for screen readers and other assistive technologies to read out, whereas the other hyperlinks, which are the URL or the web addresses, are difficult to read and understand. To change the display text of the hyperlink, you need to right-click on the hyperlink. So we are changing the display text of the last hyperlink on this slide. Right-click and then choose Edit Hyperlink, and then at the top you will find this field Text to Display. There you should write something such as, for this link, the New York Times, and then click OK. So the display text will change. It will still work. People will still be able to click and go to the relevant web page, and this is now accessible for all users.
Thank you, Prashant. And Erin already told that Word and other Office programs have built-in accessibility checker, which helps you to find accessibility errors and fix them. And now we are going to show you how to run the accessibility checker. Okay, in the newest version of Word, you can start the accessibility checker. Select Review tab, and then select Check Accessibility. And you will have the inspection results on the right-hand side. And you will see errors and warnings. Fix all the errors and check the warnings if you have to correct them, fix them. So let's now have a look at the list of errors. one of the very common error is missing alternative text. And you can choose one of the items in the list. Let's take the picture for 43. And then the focus on the document will go to that image. So you will see it on the main page. And you can click the picture 43 here and see more how to fix it. And also you can see on the lower why fix and steps to fix. But here the recommended actions is shown, and it says add a description. And if you click on that, then we can write the alternative description there. Here you could see that it have the name of the file name there, so it's better to write there something. And now we are writing a colored map, shows the route of the Titanic from Southampton, etc. Okay. It is also possible here to generate a description for me to push that, but I recommend do not do that. And if the image had been a decorative image, then we could have marked it as a decorative. And in this way, you should go through all the image pictures that are missing to alternative text. Okay, the other very common error is that image or object is not in line. And let's now have a look what has happened. Okay, here the focus went to the image, and we can see that it's not in line. You can move it there, and we can fix it also this by changing the image in line with text. And when we choose that, you can see that the error is not anymore seen in the inspection results. Okay, then there are some warnings. You might have merged or split cells in a table, but this might be something that you have, this is correct. You don't have to correct it if this is done on purpose. But let's have a look. What is the warning? Hard to read text contrast. Now we can see that there is a light gray background and also quite light gray text. And there is not enough contrast between the text and the background. And we can fix that by making the text darker. Thank you. So, okay, so what you have to do, fix all the errors and go through the warnings and see whether you have to fix them or not. Okay, then I'd like to mention you that unfortunately the accessibility checker does not find all the errors. So it warns you that if there are no headings in the document, so this is something that it's not an error, but it's a tip. And please always try to have at least one heading in your Word document. So here we should add in this document heading structure. And this can be done, for example, marking up the heading as we showed earlier. Also, one problem is that if you have skipped heading levels, the Word accessibility checker does not warn you about this. So do use the navigation pane to check the heading structure. And one problem with alternative text is also that the accessibility checker do not check the quality of the alt text. So there might be a case that the document can have a photo of a cute cat, and then the alternative text might be like a drawing of an angry dog. So you need to manually go through and check the images. Like, for example, here we have inserted an image, and the alternative text says emg1.jpg, and it doesn't tell anything about the content of the image. So you have to write yourself the alternative text here. So you cannot totally rely on the accessibility checker, but it's a very nice tool to have. And there are some things you need to check manually in the Word document.
Okay, thanks, Kasi. So in conclusion, we can say that making the document accessible benefits all users. It may help you reduce the time taken to format the document. It can make you more efficient. For example, to make the section names prominent, you may be increasing the font size, changing the font, changing the colors, and you can achieve the same effect by just in one click, just by applying a heading style. The use of the heading structure makes the document navigable. Navigability improves for everyone, not just users with disability. Without the structure, even the non-disabled people can't really randomly skip to any section or subsection. The navigation pane can't be used. So the usability for everybody improves when you make the document. It is the right thing to do, and very often it is also a legal requirement.
Thank you, Erin, Kirsi, and Prashant for some presentations and some very smooth demonstrations there. And I have a bunch of questions all lined up for us. Let's start with the first one that came in, which is, we know that some people are using the very latest versions of Word, some people are using older versions. What do you have to say around the accessibility features in the different versions, Erin?
Thanks, Richard. That's a really good question. As you said, the latest and greatest versions are always going to have the most accessibility features. So we've been doing this accessibility push, as I mentioned previously, for a couple of years, but every year that we release a new product, it's going to have a cumulative amount of features and updates and just new things to try. So the latest and greatest is always going to have the most accessibility features. For example, the desktop or web versions of Office 365 will have more accessibility features than Office Desktop 2019, 2016, 2013, or 2010. I know those are still used a little bit in the market, but the most features will be in the latest and greatest Office 365 versions, which are available, desktop and web versions, but they are more accessible than standalone versions 10, 13, 16, or 19 of Office desktop product.
We've got some questions now which are grouped together, which relate to kind of tabular information. So the first is a clarification, please. This question comes from Tim. Prashant said to avoid merged cells, but when doing the accessibility checker, Tim spotted that Kirsi allowed that to happen. So how hard and fast is this rule around merged cells, and what are the implications of allowing those to go through? So Prashant or Kirsi, maybe you'd like to pick this one?
Yeah, okay. So when each column is separate, has a separate header, then as the screen reader user is going through the table and they are at maybe down below in the table, still then they are able to find out which column they are and what is this information all about. When the cells are merged, for those columns, those two columns, the same column header is read out. So some users will still be able to understand the content, but yes, if possible, one should avoid merging the cells. But sometimes the data is such that it can't be done. So then we can just let it go. We can ignore that warning. Yeah, we have an example here on screen. So we see that the last column is length. It is a merged cell, and then the row below has two headings, meters and feet. We are hearing the screen reader.
Length column header.
So I was trying to demonstrate using narrator in Word. This works very well. It's reading the column heading, and whichever column I'm in,
document with poor,
it will read me that merge cell, and I'm not hearing that the numbers actually are for meters and feet. I'm not hearing the extra information. If this was split, I guess, into separate row headings, then I would be able to hear that information correctly. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Yes, correct.
Next
Here
generator.
we could have split this, and we could have said length in meters and length in feet. So this table can be modified slightly to improve the accessibility in this case.
Let's make sure we're answering Tim's question. Okay. So yeah, so Kirsi, you allowed it in your in the accessibility checker. What are your thoughts on merge cells in tables? An absolute no, or sometimes are they okay to keep in?
I think it's sometimes you need to keep them if the nature of the table is that. But like Prashant said, and in this example, we could write it two columns, length in meters and length in feet. And I think that when you want to make an accessible document, try to keep the tables as simple as possible. But many times, if there are very, very tricky tables, you cannot keep them simple.
Let's stick with tables for a little bit longer. We've got two more questions. One is, what are the implications for importing a table from Excel or another application such as Excel, is the question.
Yeah, I think many times if you make sure that the Excel table is accessible, you can use the accessibility checker in Excel. Then you can import it to your Word document, and it should work fine. And so between the different Office documents, you can copy things, and they usually work fine. But do use the accessibility checker in the Word document.
That's great, thank you. And the last, for the moment, question on tables is, in Microsoft Word, it's possible to add alt text for tables. When would you do this? In what sort of circumstances, or in fact, should you be doing that each time?
So the earlier versions of Microsoft Word, the accessibility checker actually flagged this if the table did not have an alt text. The recent accessibility checker doesn't have this test, so it's not mandatory. Actually, this field is not really used by the screen readers or most standard technology. So but however, if the description is there, and if the document is being converted to say some other format, maybe a plain text format, then people may use this description. They may put it in place of the table. Sometimes in some scenarios it may be useful. So in my view, it is not critical, not essential now, but yeah, I mean, providing it can have some use cases.
That's great, thank you. I have a question from Dinesh, which is related to the hyperlinks. And Prashant, you showed how you can add display text for hyperlinks. Dinesh is asking about, what about the screen tip? This was something that popped up as well on the screenshot. What's the role of the screen tip, please?
Yes, screen tip is, I believe it helps the sighted users. I think I would suggest that we have something useful, something similar in the screen tip also. The screen tip is not really what is used by different screen readers or read aloud tools. But yes, I mean, it helps to have the same text, I suppose, or something similar, something
great,
useful over there. Yeah.
Thank you. So then I have a question from Hans, and Hans is saying, in Microsoft Word, you can hide the images and show placeholders instead. And if you do so, the images will be replaced by empty boxes. Do you know, is there a way of showing available text alternatives within the boxes? Because this would be great, since it would help assessing the quality of the image description. I guess I could see a workflow where you kind of see all the alt text in place, almost kind of how a screen reader will encounter it. Or maybe sometimes if you see a web page where the image hasn't loaded, you see the alt text there instead. Do we know whether or not this is a feature that is in Word or could be considered for it? So I don't think I've seen that option. Maybe it's a suggestion coming your way, Erin.
Yeah, I probably would be a suggestion. I haven't seen that either. A good way to make suggestions into the product is through the user voice site. If you just go to any browser and you select, type in the search keywords Microsoft, user voice, and Word, then you can put any kind of product suggestions there. The nice thing about having user voice is it's public and other people can vote on that suggestion. So if there are multiple people who also want that same feature, it can get voted up. The higher impact, meaning the more people who vote on it, then the more likely the product group will to prioritize it in the next releases.
Thank you. The next question is around numbered lists. And the question is that in Word documents, sometimes the numbered lists are in multiple different formulas, different ways of presenting the numbers with letters and numerics and so on. How can we simplify the numbered lists, make them easier to use?
Okay, in my view, as long as the numbers have been generated automatically, it is okay to have any kind of numbering like Roman numbers or alphabets. It's not a problem, and one can always choose the format option. The bullets and numbering list has a formatting option where you can change the numbers also. You can have it start from a certain number, or you can choose a different numbering scheme. So as per requirement, that can be done. In general, we don't like to change the content. If the author has presented it in a certain way, we want to just keep it like that. Just ensure the accessibility part. So if it is a list which is manually created, if the numbers have been typed manually, or in case of bullets, if the bullets are inserted graphics, then we interfere with it. We change that and choose a similar automatic bullets or automatic numbered list.
Thank you. The next question it's back to tables. It's a popular topic. The question feels more like a screen reader type question, but it's relevant to this. It's all about the accessibility of Word documents. How can a screen reader user get like a summary of a Word table from their screen reader, maybe simple or complex, to be able to hear about what their table is? Any thoughts on that, Prashant?
Okay, so the screen reader will, when it encounters the table, it of course announces the number of rows and columns it has, and one is navigating the rows and column numbers are also announced, and the screen readers also provide many keystrokes to have either the column header or row header announced or not announced as per the requirement. It's also possible to directly skip to the next row from the present cell or the previous row or the column. So that is it. I believe once it is a proper table, screen reader users will have full control to navigate and read the table.
Thank you, Prashant. A couple of questions coming your way now, Kirsi. So the first is Tim again is saying that maybe you mentioned using all caps in your presentation. So can we just hear your thoughts on this?
It was in the example when we wrote the heading. It was used in all caps. And Tim is correct that it's having a long text in all caps is problematic for people who have learning difficulties or reading difficulties. So I would say that it's good to avoid using long text with all captions, all caps. But this is sort of for people who are using screen readers. Then it's not a problem when they can hear the text. So
thank you for that.
Should have a look at the what kind of instructions the organizations for dyslexia or learning difficulties have, and try to follow they lay out advice and suggestions for making sure that the text is visually very well easy to read.
And Kirsi, you've reminded me that I remember the advice from RNIB, the blindness organisation in the UK, was for folk with low vision not to use all caps as well for runs of text, because the letter shapes are then much more difficult to discern. So, okay, so that's a very helpful clarification. Thank you for that. A linked question is about fonts. So are there any recommended fonts for use when you're creating your Word document? Kirsi?
I would say that choose a font that is as clear as possible. Like in these slides, we are using a special font. Richard, what is it called? Atkinson Hyperlegible font. Okay,
yeah, this is one that has come from the Braille Institute, actually, in the States. There are similar fonts from APH and from an organization in France and elsewhere. So, yeah.
But I'd like to remind that if you are sending a Word document to a person and you don't lock it, then they can themselves, edit the font. But if you send a PDF file that you have converted from Word document, then you cannot anymore change the font. So I think it's very good to use that kind of file formats that allow users to adjust the fonts themselves and adjust the layout themselves.
Great, thank you. What are the considerations for making a Word document if you're then going to create a PDF from it and you want that to be as accessible as possible?
Yeah.
Do you need to follow some different guidelines to what has been shown in this presentation?
Well, you have to make sure that your Word document is accessible, and then you have to make sure that you convert the Word document into PDF file in a correct way. So you can go to File tab and then use the Export option, and then there's the Create PDF. And then before publishing the PDF, you should check the options and choose the following things: that document structure tags for accessibility. And when you have chosen that, and also document properties, then you can make sure that the Word document is converted into an accessible PDF file, and the necessary tags in the PDF file are made. You need to have a tagged PDF file. There are also some details. You have to add a title in the file properties in order to make an accessible PDF file. But I would suggest that look for instructions. There are a lot of them online, and you can find good instructions how to ensure that the Word document is converted into an accessible PDF file.
I hope you'll allow me another follow-up question. This comes from Christopher on this topic. Christopher says that they notice that there's occasionally degradation in terms of producing a PDF, in terms of different spacing being there. Actually, Christopher's talking about PDF to a Word document, which is the other way around. So
yeah, I think that's a tricky thing. So yeah,
that's the topic of a whole other webinar, as it were.
Yeah, but yeah, I think I would love to see when the Microsoft and Adobe would work together and solve the problems that there are still between converting Word to document to PDF file and vice versa.
It could be that Christopher is referring to the latest versions of Microsoft Office and Microsoft Word, where you can open a PDF inside Word and then edit it as if it were a Word document. But I think it comes up with suitable warnings when you do that. You wouldn't expect to kind of completely the full fidelity of spacing and things like that, I guess, with that.
I think it a lot of depends how good the PDF file itself it is. Does it have tags and etc.
Great. Okay. So we've got time for maybe squeezing one more question. I'm going to put it your way, Prashant, because it relates to some of the work that I know you've done in relation to helping people make education resources accessible. How can we handle additional texts that accompany the basic text? So this is like a sidebar or a call out, I think is the terminology. This is quite common in textbooks on the subject of management, EV, and computer science, EV mentions. What's the best way of handling this in a Word document?
Yes, so people generally place this within text boxes or divide the layer into columns. For accessibility purpose, we have to ensure that the document has a easy and simple reading order. So the best thing to do is to put this text as a paragraph, and you can put it within a border. If you like, you can also highlight it with a different background color. But one should avoid using text boxes or using or dividing the text into different columns. When that is done, screen readers and some other assistive technologies may skip that content, and or it may be read at some other location rather than where it is intended. And definitely when this document is converted to some other format, then also that information may just get lost or may get like maybe placed at some other location.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we're coming to the end of this session. Once again, thank you to Erin, Kirsi, and Prashant for sharing great information and advice. As I mentioned in the introduction, the previous webinars are all available on the DAISY website, so do head there to check out the back catalogue. Our next webinar will be on March the 24th, and it's entitled Exploring the Accessible Mobile Reading Revolution. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way that many of us work, learn, and engage in leisure activities. People have chosen, and in some cases have been forced, to use the only technology available to them, reading on mobile devices. But for readers with print disabilities, are these mobile devices suitable replacements for an accessible desktop experience? This webinar will examine the features and limitations of accessible reading on popular mobile apps, discuss technology developments that are impacting on accessible mobile learning, and explore what this means for the future of accessible reading. Join us on March the 24th to learn more. You can register at daisy.org/webinars, where you can also sign up to the announcements mailing list. I hope you'll join us again soon. In the meantime, thank you for your time. Stay safe and well, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.